Have you ever wondered what the people you lead need from you? We often talk on this podcast about what we as leaders need to be doing and how we can be developing. But today, I want to talk with you about what your followers or team members need from you. And it starts with a teenager. Hey friend, I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, and I'm here with you today for episode 218 of the podcast. I am recording this podcast solo, and it is going to be very stripped down. It's not going to have the typical music and all the things because I am recording this the night before it goes out. That is not what I like to do with this podcast, and it's not my normal routine. But to be quite honest, with everything that our family has been dealing with moving and just getting settled and having a new job for me and all of that, it has been very difficult for me to figure out how to manage all the things. And so I am recording this the night before, so I hope you'll just go with me, forgive me for not having all the normal bells and whistles on the podcast. So let me dive in to what I want to share with you on this very short solo episode today. I didn't expect to get a powerful leadership insight from listening to a teenager give a speech, but that's what happened this past weekend. We were at the cast party for the show that my daughter and dozens of other kids performed in on Friday night. They performed Footloose after a 2-week camp that they all were in. It was part of Christian Youth Theater, and it was super fun to watch them perform. And then at the cast party, they were having awards. And during the awards portion, a few of the kids got up to present to the directors who had been leading them over the past 2 weeks, running this theater camp and really just pouring their heart and soul into these kids. As the final speech was given by the lead character of the show, he said this about the director: "You always made us feel seen and heard." And that just struck me in the moment that he said it. Isn't that what every person desires? To feel seen and heard? This teenager had many other positive things to say about the director, but I believe this was the most profound. He shared that he went into the show not sure if he had what it took to perform the lead role. But the director saw him, he heard him, he knew he had the potential, and he called it out of him. The next morning on my way to church, this thought was just rolling around in my mind, and it kind of just occurred to me that this is something that leaders need to give the people that follow them. We need to be seeing the people that we lead and hearing them. Ultimately, leadership is not about how good we look or what kind of accolades we get for our work. It's about seeing the potential in the people that we lead, whether it's our kids, our community, our group at church, our teammates at work, the people that we lead in our company, whatever it might be, in whatever role your leadership plays out. Your job and the best thing you can give to others is to see them and to hear them. It's about seeing where they are and knowing where they could go and helping them get there. And it's about hearing their voice, not demanding what we want from them, but finding out what they feel they can contribute. So I want to ask you this question. Have you ever been on the receiving end of a leader who truly sees and hears you? If you have, you know how powerful that is. Simple things like your leader stopping to ask, "How are you, really?" can make a world of difference. A leader who sees those he or she leads shows them that they are cared for. It communicates that they are not just a contribution to a team, but they are cared for as a person. And this type of leadership can transform someone's day, and it builds trust that you need to have as their leader. What about when you're in a meeting and many people are sharing their views and you haven't gotten a chance to share yours yet? But your leader makes a point to stop and ask, "What do you think about this direction?" This is something that I don't know how often we experience this, but when you do experience it, you realize how incredible it is and how blessed you are, at least hopefully you do realize how blessed you are to have a leader like that. And so what I want us to think about is how can we be that kind of leader, even if that is not what we are seeing exemplified for us or modeled for us, we still can choose to see people and to hear them. This is another example. What about if you're in a one-on-one meeting with your leader, your supervisor, your boss, whatever you want to call that person, and that person asks you, in what ways could we improve or change what we're doing here at church, in our organization, in our business? Maybe they ask, what opportunities do you see that I might be missing? And they sit and they actually listen to your input. A leader who is willing to hear your voice, the voice of those he or she is leading, is a sign of humility. It's also the sign of a leader who is probably going to be much more successful than those who try to make all the decisions based on their own insights without gathering input from their community. So as you lead in whatever capacity God has called you to, at home, at work, in your business, in your church, ask yourself if you are truly taking the time to see and hear those you are leading. Now, if you want to get some encouragement or even some practical ideas on how to do this, then I want to direct you to our communication series that we did on the podcast. I will link it up in the show notes, but it has a lot of great episodes about communication, which is somewhat related to this topic that I just shared today. Now, obviously, this episode was super short, and maybe you like that. Maybe it works for you. So if you enjoyed it, feel free to send me a DM and let me know. But like I said, this was one of those, I want to share an episode with you. This was on my mind, so I went ahead and recorded it. But I want to give you an update for what to expect in the coming few months of this podcast. So as I mentioned, my time at this moment is a bit limited, and I'm still getting into the routine of what we are doing here in our family's routine and life and all of that. So I am going to take the next few months and pause from putting out new content, but we are going to go ahead and share some episodes, some older episodes. Now, we just celebrated 5 years of the podcast, so we have plenty of podcast episodes, and my guess is that you have not listened to every single one. So we're going to go ahead and share some of these older episodes, reshare them out for you on the podcast. So if you've missed it, if you didn't hear it the first time, then go ahead and listen. And if you did listen the first time, it might be a good idea to just give it a second listen. I know for me, when I listened to the episodes, even after I was the one that recorded them and interviewed the person, I always get something new out of it. So I want to encourage you to listen along, share this podcast with a friend too. That's another thing that makes such a difference for us. When we see you sharing the podcast, whether it's on your Instagram stories or just shouting us out on social media or leaving a review, that makes a big impact. And it also just encourages Holly and I to know that you're actually out there, you're actually listening. And yes, we should go ahead and keep going with the podcast. So thank you so much for being here with me. I just am so grateful for our podcast listener community, and I'm excited to bring you new content in the future. I'm going to give you a few months of some replays, and then from there, I hope to be back with new, fresh content, fresh interviews, and content that will just continue to encourage you in your leadership journey as a Christian woman. So in the meantime, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.